Outsiders do not agree with these kind of things. Outsiders tend to look at Sanskrit mainly as a language, not necessarily as a whole architecture and way of life, the way the insiders do. May not have the same Shraddha. I have started focusing on a particular outsider school, which is US centered, which I call American Orientalism. And in this book, I differentiate between the earlier European Orientalism started by people like William Jones and many, many others from Europe. I differentiate between that and the new American Orientalism because it's centered in the US, not because there's anything national or ethnic about it in the US. And when I study this American Orientalism, and I describe in detail in my book what is different about it and how the traditionalist view is very different and how a traditionalist would do Purva Paksh on this American Orientalist view and respond to it. I look at 3 or 4 major differences that would concern a traditionalist when they look at the American Orientalist view. The absence of sacredness, the whole Paramarthika realm, is undermined or dismissed because it's considered either socially abusive, it's considered to be something that supports a hierarchy of power, it is toxic. The words used are toxic, poisonous, abusive, social hierarchy, these kind of, a lot of words in the vocabulary of this school. So the sacredness is removed. We argued why it should be removed in terms of what's valuable, and the idea of social, political oppression is added. So this is an outsider's lens because the insider who's practicing does not see it that way. Of course there are social problems, but there are social problems in every system. And these can also be solved from within. You do not need a Marxist intervention or an outsider intervention to do that. So what I am trying to do is a Purva Paksha of the American Orientalism school, bring out issues that the insider, the traditionalist, should know about. So far, I find that most traditionalists are unaware of this. Some of them don't care. Some of them find that the writings of the American Orientalists are too difficult, too dense, too complicated, and not very easy for them to understand because these things are written in Western theories. For instance, I would guess very few people would know a whole lot about a European thinker called Vico, V-I-C-O. Very few traditional Sanskrits have know about it. Yet, a dominant school of Sanskrit studies in Chicago, in Columbia, and so on, use Vico's ideas, Vico's principles to critique the Paramarthika realm. So this would be something a traditionalist cannot respond because he doesn't even know what they're talking about. Very few would have understood a whole lot about Benjamin and his theory of the aestheticization of power, which is how that school interprets the spread of Sanskrit through Southeast Asia. The whole spread of Sanskrit through Southeast Asia as a sort of conspiracy between Brahmins and royal courts to come up with a system of hierarchy and power over the common public such that the royal kings would be seen to be divine, and the Brahmin is the one who does the black magic of yajna to make that happen, and so both of them support each other, and the common public is sort of exploited. And this is done in a very aesthetic way. Aestheticization of power is a theory which says you keep your power, but in a way that people don't think it is about power, about your power. People think that you are actually giving them entertainment, you're giving them power. So you do kavya, you do dance, you do Ramayana, you have architecture, you have paintings, and everybody participates, and they all feel very happy, but actually the power is with the people who've come up with this whole system. So there is this theory that the whole spread of Sanskrit and Ramayana was this kind of a conspiracy to do this throughout Southeast Asia. So it spread as a sort of franchise. The Brahmins franchised it in one king after another, quickly. That's why it spread so quickly. So there are all these theories. And so for a traditionalist to respond, first you need to understand what the theory is saying. And to understand that, you have to go to some university in the US and spend many, many years studying Western thought, the Frankfurt School of Marxism, and Gramsci, the Italian head of the Communist Party, his theories on these ideas. So either the person has to submit to years of study of Western Marxist leftist thought in order to understand what they're saying, and if he does that, he'll become one of them. He will, and there's a whole army of such Indians trained now in the American Orientalism lens to come back to India and apply this way of thinking to study and interpret Sanskrit. And some of these people are in very powerful positions in academia, in media, and so you see a very sophisticated view of Sanskrit which says it's a system of exploitation, it's a system of, you have to study it as a system of power. Now, the differences are that we look at it, the insiders look at it as a sacred system, as a positive system that gives us value and purpose and so on. It has problems like any other system has, but we can also solve it. We have solutions, and we have solved problems in the past. Whereas the outsiders does not see it as a system which is positive, they see it as a Marxist class struggle, a socio-economic exploitative kind of a system. So these are basic differences. The American Orientalist view of rasa is not a system of transcendence necessarily, but rasa is a sort of a secular emotion, but that's it. Whereas we would see that that is one aspect of it, but there's more to it. The idea that Ramayana is being interpreted by this outsider school as a system Valmiki created to bring Oriental despotism into the South Asia and Southeast Asia, because this would justify the king being divine and the enemy being the Rakshas. So the divine king and the demonic enemy became a kind of story that the kings could apply to fight their enemies by convincing their people that we are the divine, you have to be on our side, and we are fighting the enemy, and they are the demonic. So using this kind of an interpretation, a vast library, a vast inventory of dissertations, journals, conferences, a lot of content has been created in the last 30, 40 years, which is what I'm going through and giving in my own analysis.